Hello, and welcome back to another chapter of It Hurts the Hope by Inquilidori on AO3. Chapter 7, Apologize for My Wrongdoings. Exuma takes another deep breath and does his best to ground himself and his mind, ignoring the worried look that Zedef is giving him. After the dramatics of yesterday, Exuma immediately called an emergency meeting to tell the hermits what he and Doc learned about Zilqua. The hermits were understandably horrified to learn that Zilqua was a player at some point, because the process to turn any being into another is difficult and very painful. Zilqua doesn't know anyone personally who has gone through that kind of thing, but he's read about it plenty, and it kept him up for hours last night. The thoughts of what had happened running rampant in his head. He knows it was most likely done without Zilqua's permission. He knows it would have hurt. He knows that Zilqua is not a full watcher, though they have no idea what a full watcher really is. He thinks that Zilqua is not a danger, and he's less wary now, but it's still hard to match the realities in his head, to separate this watcher from the other watchers. Mumbo immediately wanted to go and see Zilqua, practically demanding it in a way that Exuma had never seen from the usually anxious hermit. Exuma refused, but only because he wanted to talk to Zilqua first, and be absolutely sure that he wouldn't snap like he did again like he did. So that's why he is where he is, standing in front of the room, trying to ground himself, because he's quite sure if Zilqua doesn't snap, he might. There's some instinctual part of him screaming at the top of his lungs to toss the Watcher off the server, and it's taking everything in him to ignore it. He was once a player, he reminds himself, and walks into the room. Zilqua is sitting on the bed, idly preening his wings, but his eyes snap up to Exuma when he comes in. His hands fall from their task, and he puts them on his lap instead, twisting them together in a nervous fashion. His face betrays nothing. "Hello," he says hesitantly, and Exuma closes the door behind him, then sits down on the floor and takes off his helmet. He's pretty sure he spots a flash of surprise on Zilqua's face as he removes the headgear, but it's gone quickly. "Hello," Exuma echoes back, setting aside his helmet and folding his hands together in a similar way to Zilqua, though his are much less white-knuckled. "I've come to apologize." Apologize?" Zilqua repeats, and now there's definitely surprise in his expression, along with confusion. "For what?" "For our earlier conversations, and the way I've been dealing so far with this situation." He pauses for a minute, chewing over words before he finally admits, "I might have overreacted a lot. And instead of asking you what your intentions were, I simply assumed from what I knew." "Watchers are dangerous," Zilqua says quietly, while his voice is hesitant. There's some semblance of understanding in it. "You reacted based on what you knew, which is that we, are a threat. You wanted to protect your players. And yet, I never stopped to consider that you might need protection as well." Exuma sighs and runs a hand through his hair, continuing on more quietly. "Doc didn't tell you what he found in his scans, did he?" "No." Zilqua is immediately tense again, just like the first time Exuma mentioned Doc. "Is something wrong? Does he need to come back?" "No, he got everything he needed. There's no need," Exuma explains, which Could have could have sworn Zelqua's eyes shuddered with confusion again, like he was expecting something more. It's just, he found something odd about your code, something we didn't expect to find. He trails off, in case Zelqua doesn't want to hear it, or maybe he wants to ask another question. But Zelqua simply looks him in the eyes and nods once. Tell me. You were once a player. He can see the second the words hit the watcher. His eyes widen and his jaw goes slack. He mouths the word player, as if testing to see what it feels like to say. A player? He finally repeats faintly, and Exuma nods. It's faint, right at the bottom of your code, but it's there. You were a player and the Watchers took you and turned you into one of them. He observes Zelqua as he turns this information over, eyebrows scrunched together, and mouth moving silently. He wonders if Zelqua knows how expressive his face is when he's thinking. It's like an ever-shifting painting of emotion. It's slightly endearing, a thought that hits Exuma like cold water in the face. When did he start to think of Zelqua as endearing? Do you need some time? No. Zelqua interrupts, and his face twists into an apology. Sorry, but no, that's alright. I think I was always aware, in a way. There was some part of me that never really forgot. Maybe that's the playerness in you, Exuma offers. Zelqua looks thoughtful as he nods. His hands relax from their white-knuckled grip for the first time since Exuma stepped in. Thank you, the Watcher says quietly, for telling me. Thank you. It's your code. I don't see why I wouldn't have, Exuma replies, and that strange confusion is back. Like, that's exactly what Zelqua was expecting. For Exuma to keep a vital piece of information about his code from him. Exuma feels like he sees it all the time. The bafflement mixed with caution and something like relief. He has no idea why, but it's always there. Simmering just below the surface, confusion at the room Zelqua has been put in, at the carpet on the floor, the clothes he's given, their reluctance to hurt him and acceptance of his fears. It's like he's completely not used to any sort of basic necessities and kindness. And that scares Exuma more than he liked to admit. Well, I assume that's all. I suppose that's all, Exuma says, because he's not sure what else to say. I wanted you to know in case you didn't. Zelqua simply nods, and Exuma rises to his feet again and picks up his helmet. He's about to leave, but a thought has him turning back. Something he almost forgot, except there's no way he could. I'd like to add that, although I'm still cautious about your situation, I'm afraid my hermits can be quite stubborn when they want, and can't be held back for very long, he says with a rueful smile, and he can tell Zelqua is confused, so he clarifies. Mumbo and Scar would like to come and visit again, if that's alright with you. He can see the way Zelqua brightens like a little ray of sunshine. It radiates along his whole body, wings fluffing up and eyes sparking as if he almost nearly does something that might be the start of a smile. And then it all dims again. His wings smooth out, his eyes shudder again with wary caution. It's like a cloud has passed over the sun, leaving them in cool shade. You said they can't come in, he says, and Exuma nods reluctantly. I did, but I know you didn't mean to hurt anyone. It stars help the poor soul who tries to forbid Scar from doing something. And in this case, Mumbo as well. When Exuma had told them they weren't allowed to visit the Watcher, He had been shocked to discover that Mumbo made a terrifying, looming figure with dark eyes and a cold voice when he got angry. He informed Exuma in no uncertain terms that he was going to go back, and Exuma could either deal with it or kick Mumbo off the server. Of course, Exuma wasn't going to ban Mumbo, so he was reluctantly coerced into retracting his statement. But he made it clear he had to talk to Zelqua first, which is why he's here now. They're both very determined to come back, no matter what it takes. If I told them not to, they'd simply mine through the walls. He pauses and adds before he could change his mind. And Impulse and Dog wouldn't be very far behind. You make quite the impression on my hermits. Zelka seems to be at a loss for words, so Exuma clears his throat and puts his helmet back on, snapping the clasp shut with small clicks. I think there are a few others who would like to meet you as well, if that's okay with you. What he really means is if Zelka will stay in control, and the Watcher seems to catch on to the underlying meaning, because he nods in confirmation. He stays on his bed and observes as Exuma crosses the door and puts his hand on the knob, about to open it. I'm sorry if I'm finding it difficult to trust you, Exuma says quietly, before his cowardice gets the best of him. Eyes fixed firmly on the doorknob, he doesn't dare look up. My stories with the Watchers is not a kind one. And while I know you are not like them, it's still hard to look at you and not think of you as just an enemy. It will take a while for me to adjust, so it's not your fault. Before Selkwa can say anything, Exuma flees from the room and doesn't pause to speak to Zedov or B-Dubs, the current guards who watch him leave with poorly disguised concern. Zumavoid, you can visit, but I want you to be cautious and under no circumstances touch him. Momo Jumbo, thank you, X! Good times, Scar. I'm at Zell's room. Where are you at? Momo Jumbo, landing now. Zumavoid, were you two just lurking nearby until I was done? Good times so far. Absolutely not. Mumbo Jumbo, possibly. Zumavoid, just be careful, please. Mumbo and Scar come in not even 5 minutes after Exuma leaves, which makes Zelka wonder if they were just waiting outside the door the whole time. Scar is carrying Jelly in his arms, and Mumbo is holding a basket of cookies and other baked goods. Hey, Zell! Scar says cheerfully and immediately lowers himself onto the bed next to Zelqua without any sort of hesitation. He releases Jelly from his arms and allows her to bound over to his Zelqua. Good to see that you're feeling better. Mumbo is a bit slower in approaching, and he sits down on the floor next to Scar instead of the bed. Probably because he doesn't want to crowd the Watcher. Zelqua is touched by this, but he doesn't say anything, and instead he lets Jelly curl up on his lap. He accepts the cookie that Mumbo offers and shoves the whole thing in his mouth, relishing the burst of flavor and sugar on his tongue. Void, he's missed these. Scar laughs cheerfully when the entire snack disappears from Zelqua's hands, and he takes a cookie as well. We're both very lucky to have a master chef like Mumbo, he muses, biting into the snack. Mumbo flushes a light pink and tries to stammer out a protest, but Scar cheerfully steamrolls over his words with his own. Let me tell you, he makes the most wonderful desserts. The only thing about Mumbo is that he is a chef. You ask him for a sandwich and you'll end up with a 5-course meal. You wouldn't know the difference. Mumbo fired back and turned to Zelqua with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Scar is the complete opposite, you know. He'd be able to burn tea and bring the whole kitchen down in the process. He's most comfortable with a sausage on a stick over an open campfire. But that's the best kind of sausage, Scar protests. Anyways, I can make excellent desserts. So I think that makes up for it all. I tell that to my burnt kitchen, Mumbo mutters. But there's no real ire in his voice. He looks up at Zelqua with carefully curious eyes. What about you, Zel? Anything you like to cook? There it is again. The nickname. Zelqua can't remember if he's ever been called a nickname before. He feels like he has, but it's definitely not that one. Did he have nicknames from his previous name? The one he can't remember no matter how hard he tries? He's so caught up in his musings that it takes him a moment to remember he was asked a question. Oh, I don't know, he admits quietly, and looks down at Jelly in order to avoid Scar and Mumbo's eyes. You don't know if you can cook? Scar tries to clarify, and Zelqua bites his lip hard enough for it to hurt. No, he says in a small voice, and if he was looking up, he'd catch the sharp look that Mumbo shoots his friend. A reprimand and a warning at the same time. Scar shoots him with a look right back, but doesn't push the subject further. Well, that's fine. We can teach you, Scar says cheerfully, and Zelqua feels his heart stutter, because Scar says like he's expecting Zelqua to stay, like he wants him to stay. But that's impossible. Zelqua presses his lips together and continues to pet Jelly. Mumbo and Scar are undeterred by his silence, and take turns telling him about their days, recounting adventures and escapades. Mumbo goes off on several tangents about Redstone that make Zelqua's head spin, but he's usually cut off by Scar before they can get too lengthy. With all due respect, but you'll put Zel to sleep if you keep going on about automatic farms, Scar tells him, and Mumbo splutters indignantly for a moment. But it's really quite simple, he protests. Then they're off again, tossing retorts back and forth like a tennis match, and the balls are grenades that they can't be caught holding. A tennis match. Zelqua knows what that is, but he's not entirely sure why. He's quite sure he's never been to one. Maybe he's read about them a long time ago? Whatever the reason, he finds that he really does enjoy sitting with the duo, listening to them talk and quietly petting Jelly. He doesn't even notice that his wings have been relaxing until one of them brushes Scar's shoulder, sitting close enough so that the feathers can just barely touch him. Zelqua freezes, as if he's been turned to ice. Scar stills, but doesn't do anything else, falling silent and glancing over the slightly outstretched wing for a brief moment. Zelqua refuses to look at him and stares at the floor instead. He braces himself for anger. Maybe just irritation if he's lucky. He has no idea how hermits react to being touched. So anyways, so then I went to Tango and asked him. Scar turns back to Mumbo and continues his story, completely ignoring Zelqua's swing and acting as if nothing happened. It's confusing. Does he mind the wing? Does he not want to dare? Zelqua stays completely frozen, waiting to see if it's all just a ruse to make him lower his defenses. He's fully expecting Scar to turn around at any moment and realize that Zelqua's wing is still touching him and get angry. But Scar doesn't do anything. He just keeps going with his tail, gesturing with his hands to emphasize his words. So Zelqua ever so slowly reaches out further with his wing and brushes it against Scar's back, deliberately this time. He feels like his heart is in his throat the whole time, his breath so shallow it's practically non-existent. He's so sure that Scar is going to say something. Do something. Why am I doing this then? Maybe some part of him wants to test them. See how far he can push them before they truly get angry. The other part wants to tread on eggshells and not try anything at all. But he needs to know. So he lets his wings settle partially against Scar's back, the lightest of touches that he's barely brave enough to do. And Scar doesn't move. He twitches slightly when the wing touches his back, but he doesn't even draw attention to it and continues talking with Mumbo. After what feels like an eternity, Zelqua relaxes and returns to the task of petting Jelly. He's somewhat convinced that Scar isn't going to do anything about the wing, and as time goes on, he finds himself loosening it up more. His shoulders slumping from their tense position, and his wings settling more firmly on Scar's back. Less of a feather-light touch and more of a warm weight. If Scar minds, he doesn't say it. He simply continues chatting with Mumbo, and together the three of them work their way through the entire basket of baked goods and several dozen stories. I suppose we should get going, Mumbo says at one point, a gentle reminder that they still have things to do. Still have things that need to get done. Zelqua immediately pulls his wing back from Scar's shoulders and folds it tightly against his spine, picking up Jelly and offering her to Scar. He's doing his best to be compliant, but there's a part of him that is sobbing at the fact that they have to leave. He doesn't want them to leave. He wants them to stay and talk more, and he wants to put his wing around Scar again. He clamps his lips slightly tightly together and doesn't say anything as Scar and Mumbo say goodbye and start for the door. See you soon, Sal. Scar rings out as a final farewell, and then they're gone out the exit, and Zelqua is alone again. The room seems to weigh down on him with its silence. And then, from behind the door, Zelqua can barely make out Scar's muffled voice. He touched me with his wing, Mumbo! It's an almost childlike excitement, and Zelqua feels a small smile poke at his lips. It's a strange feeling, just like all the other times it's happened. He's almost forgotten how to smile at this point. He doesn't remember ever smiling before here, because he certainly never smiled when he was with the Watchers. But the movement seems familiar, like muscle memory he can't quite forget. Did he smile as a player? It's still a new thing to him, the knowledge that he was a player once. He knows he wasn't always a Watcher, but somehow knowing what he actually was makes it all so different. He almost starts spiraling back into his thoughts, but the door creaking open pulls him back up, and he turns to the entrance with hopeful eyes. Maybe it's Mumbo or Scar. Maybe Mumbo or Scar have come back. Maybe it's Impulse. It's not Mumbo, or Scar, or Impulse. It's a young woman with fiery orange hair and pale green-hued skin. She looks dead, or undead, almost like the zombies that come out at night in unlit caves and forests. And Zelqua knows her, which is why he scrambles back until his back hits the wall, wings flaring wide, because this is the woman who almost put a crossbow bolt through his skull, and he still has vivid memories of that shaft whizzing by his ear. Whoa, hey, calm down there, critter. The woman, her name is Cleo, he remembers, looks alarmed and holds up her hands in the sign of peace. I'm not gonna hurt you. Yeah, right. Zelqua stays with his back to the wall and on high alert, every inch of his body tense and ready to fight. Cleo makes a small noise of mixed emotions and rubs a hand along the back of her neck, fiery red locks tumbling down over one shoulder, threaded with small flowers and vines. Listen, I know that Mumbo and Scar just stopped by, and I don't want to stay long, but She trails off, her eyes jumping from one corner of the room to the other, but never quite landing on Zelqua. I kind of figured I should apologize for nearly killing you and all that. Okay, Zelqua says after a long moment of silence. It's not quite forgiveness, though Cleo's statement wasn't quite an apology either. But she does seem regretful, and Zelqua living proof that people do things they regret in the heat of the moment. Okay, she agrees, and her shoulders slump slightly. I'm glad that I came over. Got that straightened out? Neither of them know what to say after that. So Cleo mumbles something quick about how Scar says you seem pretty chill. So maybe we can talk again sometime. And then disappears out the door and away from the awkward situation. Zelqua stares after her for a long time, and finally glances down at his hands. That was weird, but he thinks he's okay with it. She seems nice when she's not trying to shoot me, he thinks, and that strange little smile is back on his face. Zombie Cleo, you up for some sparring? Etho, sure thing. You there in 5? Zombie Cleo, see you there. Etho is already at the sparring grounds when Cleo arrives, taking off his thick jacket and tossing it aside so that he's left in his black turtleneck and dark pants. He summons his fishing rod from his inventory and tosses it lightly from hand to hand. You talk to Zelqua? He asks. And Cleo nods, dropping her bag on the ground next to Etho's jacket and tying her hair back into a loose ponytail. He seems okay, she concedes. They step out onto the grounds and face each other, sinking into battle stances. They built the sparring grounds together a long time ago, so they could meet up and train from time to time, whenever they managed to snatch a free moment. Even though Hermitcraft is a peaceful server, neither of them ever truly toss aside their pasts, and it's more habit than anything else to keep fit and ready for battle. 3, 2, 1. Etho counts them down and doesn't waste a moment, leaping for Cleo with his sword already raised. Cleo parries his blow with her axe and dances away, glad for the parkour training she did for MCC. Though Etho is faster and more agile, Cleo hits like a tank and doesn't waste her swings. It makes an interesting duel, the fire-haired zombie and dark-clothed something battling out across the grounds like their lives depend on it. If someone was to see it from the sidelines, they'd swear that the two fighters are mortal enemies and are out for each other's blood. But for Cleo and Etho, it's exhilarating. The air in their lungs and the blood pumping through their veins, straining muscles and the jarring impact of bone against ground and when they fall. They're evenly matched, for the most part. Sometimes they can fight for what feels like hours, raging back and forth across the ground like two storms that refuse to yield. And other times, like today, one of them slips up. Cleo's usually pretty good at dodging Etho's fishing rod, considering he uses it in almost every fight. But today, her reaction is just a second too late, and the line wraps around her ankle. It's one sharp tug, one wrong weight change, and Cleo is crashing to the ground with a shriek. Etho's sword comes to rest under her chin before she can recover. She glances up at him through fiery tangled hair. Cheater! She spits with no actual anger. And Etho chuckles, lifting his sword away and returning it to his sheath. Any weapons? Any tactics? He intones, quoting the rules they made up when they first built this place. He sits down next to Cleo and runs a hand through his hair, chest heaving and forehead stained with sweat. After a moment, he reaches up and pulls his mask down so it's pulled around his neck, and takes a deep breath in through his nose. Yeah, I know, Cleo replies with an eye roll, not mentioning the mask, and instead offering Etho a bottle of water from her inventory. He accepts it and practically drains the whole thing in one gulp, wiping away the little drops that trickle down the corners of his mouth. Cleo tries not to stare. It's a rare occurrence for Etho to take his mask or gloves off around other people, and Cleo is touched that he trusts her enough to do so. She still doesn't want to make a big deal out of it. Zelka seems nice, she said, grabbing her own bottle and taking a long drink from it. The water rushes down her throat and seems to freeze everything it touches within its coolness. It feels wonderful. Nice, Etho repeats, finishing off his water and putting it aside. Not murdery or ready to pull us all apart into code? Nope, he matches up what Scar told me. Though I didn't spend a lot of time in there. It was awkward as hell, really. He's like a little lost puppy. He's got these big eyes, Etho. I feel terrible for trying to shoot him, especially after what X said about him being a player and all. Yeah, that was a shock. Etho pulls his mask up back over his mouth and nose, hiding them again from the outside world. He sits in thoughtful silence for a long moment, and Cleo joins him, running over various thoughts in her head. She knows they're both thinking the same thing. Neither of them are sure what to think about Zelqa, even after what they've learned. And Cleo's always regarded caution as the best way to approach new things. But, on the other hand, she's starting to think that they're trying to shield themselves from feeling bad by shoving away their doubts. They're trying to battle their guilt for almost killing an innocent creature by telling themselves he's not. And Cleo's not sure she likes that idea. Zuma explains Zelka's backstory, or the small part they uncovered, and Cleo knows that neither her nor Etho is sitting well with what they've done. I should probably go and say sorry too, Etho says, and it's the first time Cleo's seen him look apologetic. If she didn't feel similarly, she might have teased him for it. And that is the end of chapter 7.